Okay, our next session today features Mckinley Winters, aka Mac, known by all of us here at Queen's College. Now, again, I'm going to read Mac's bio in his, not in his voice, I'm not going to do but it's in the first person. And you'll see, I chuckled a couple times when I was reading this because you can see Mac the storyteller starting to come out. So, of course, he's Hopedale as well. He was born in Hopedale on a cold and stormy day, but it had no impact on his personality because he's warm and friendly. He has well, I keep with the first person. I have a beautiful family of 5, 2 boys and 1 girl in between. We have been doing courses at Queen's College for the past 5 years, along with my wife Darlene. And 3 children who watched our day in and day out and learned about God with us. So good. We should charge them tuition too. Make a note to Sharon Ann to send an extra invoice for that. I enjoy traveling and talking to people with the Moravian daily text and hearing people's stories of their spiritual journey. I love working with wood, making kamutek, and traveling on the land for hunting, fishing, and time at the cabin. One day I hope to travel to Hopedale and get up to that cabin. I know I have an open invitation. One thing I learned about myself reading books and research is that reading books and research opens up your mind and gives you an understanding that helps you to grow. I graduated high school in 2002 and then worked with the Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro at diesel plant as a diesel plant operator. And in 2008, I completed a power engineering course in Cordoba to get the power plant in Voisey Bay. In 2016, I took a job at home as team leader for New Nazi-Boot Department of Health and Social Development. In 2019, I experienced a spiritual awakening. And in 2020, my wife and I quit our full-time jobs to journey into Queen's College and completed a Bachelor of Theology in 2024, and hopefully will graduate in May with a Master of Theology. Through Queen's, I was able to attend Moravian Theological Seminary out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and the North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies, also known as NATES. All courses were taken virtually. During all these years, I have sat on and been appointed chair of the Inuit and Benefits Agreement, I guess that's Land Benefits Agreement, for Inuit working conditions in Voisey Bay. In 2024, I was asked to be a board member for the 2026 Labrador Winter Games. Wow. And in December of 2024, I was appointed chair of the board for Nutrition North Canada. Wow, as well. I also volunteer at Bible and prayer nights and open gym for youth every Sunday and do a lot of work with youth and finding opportunities for them. And was a member of the Queen's College Alumni Committee from 2020 to 2023. And just to speak extemporaneously about both Mac and Darlene, they are living testimonies that you can build community with folk online. I love telling the story how everybody's experience of Mac and Darlene was online, and then one day all of a sudden they showed up here unannounced, and we shut down the place because Mac and Darlene had arrived, and we already had that deep sense of community and connection that came from Zoom. So welcome, Mckinley. Thank you so much.
Nakamik Rob and Ilitan Namik, nice to see you all. Nakamik Gudi Ulumi Inugama. Thank you, God, because I am alive today. I'll be doing a presentation on relocation, and it's all happened through my own spiritual journey, as Rob was saying in my bio. So it was through Jesus that I became aware of myself, my own identity, and working on my identity, and professors at Queen's. And during that process, I was able to look back and go back now and understand what happened with the relocation and with colonization here in Labrador, which is helping me to grow and to move forward and to hopefully help our community members and the North Coast of Labrador in the future, hopefully. And I'd like to say happy birthday to Carmel today. Happy birthday. Hope you're enjoying your day. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues who went before me this morning, Justice, Alfred, and Darlene. And we'll start my one here now. I gotta try to get this figured out. So during my presentation, if you got any questions or comments, feel free to jump in at any time. Okay, let's see if this works. There it is. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
I won't be able to see you guys, so feel free to jump in because I won't see no hands or anything. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not full screen though, Matt.
Go up from the beginning.
Okay.
To the far left there.
There you go.
Full now?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I got it on two screens here. I got two monitors going. I got to figure this out. Plug this one. Hold on, plug it here.
You can still see it, but.
Okay, you should be full screen now.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. Don't touch it anymore.
Okay. Let's see this. Relocation of Newtok and Hebron, unveiling the journey that shaped our lives. A look at history that will create memories and milestones for our generations and future generations of our families and communities. Colonization and post-colonial era. Before Moravian missionaries arrived in 1771 in Nain, Western peoples from Europe had made their mark in North America, and Inuit from northern Labrador had already begun trading with Europeans in southern Labrador. This is where Jens Haven, a carpenter with the Moravians, first met the Inuit of northern Labrador. Over the next few years, Haven established relationships with the Inuit and asked permission to come up north. And in 1771, the Moravians settled in Nain with permission from the British sovereignty, who wanted this to... There's a little... How do I get rid of this chat thing on the bottom? It's blocking my view.
You should be able to drag it out of the way, Mac.
Okay, there you go. And in 1771, the Moravians settled in Nain with permission from the British sovereignty, who wanted this to happen to stop the fighting between the two cultures. So we're going to look at three things. This is a picture of the actual picture of recently of Hebron, the restoration of the Moravian Church. Newtok's relocation in 56, Hebron's relocation in 59, and interactions with Hopedale, Inuit, and Europeans, Makowik, and Nain residents after the relocation occurred. First, we'll look at Newtok's relocation in 56. Newtok is between Nain and Hebron, about 104 kilometers north of Nain. It was led by the Department of the Division of Northern Labrador Affairs, a branch of the Newfoundland government's Department of Public Welfare. And in 1949, the Inuit voted overwhelmingly to join Canada, and it was later found, through a series of maneuvers by provincial and federal bureaucrats, Inuit were omitted from the terms of union and entered Confederation with their rights in a suspended state under the administration of the province. Newtok's eviction was without any notice from any agency, only to find out through the store manager that they were moving. And in the 1970s, several researchers went to Makowik and Nain, and it was found that the relocation was a failure to consult with Inuit. Influence. In the 1950s, the Canadian government set out Newfoundland Rangers to get a consensus on Inuit and Innu ethnicity, and it was found that there were 9,493 Inuit in the 4 Inuit regions in Canada. In Nunavut, now there are over 7,000 beneficiaries, we are called, since the formation of our government. With this in mind, Canada was aware and wanted to avoid providing services for settlers, monies that were for Indigenous peoples. Walter Rockwood. Northern Labrador's most prominent provincial bureaucrat, the director of the Division of Northern Labrador Affairs, who argued against relocation and told officials the Inuit in a stage of transition from primitive culture to society of tomorrow, and envisioned the job of government as assisting Inuit to adjust to the rapid changes. These ideas for the Inuit were published aside by Dr. Anthony Padden and the International Grenfell Association. Anthony Padden, who said, for radical and different thinking on the Eskimo problem, as we know now the Eskimo word is no longer used, this is quotations from the articles that I researched. The solution was to settle all the people north of the Kilopites into a modern planned community in an approved site where the various needs of education, health, trading facilities, communications, etc. could be provided at a reasonable cost. From his observation, he saw crowded homes that created diseases, infant mortality rate was at 40%, increased inbreeding, poverty, problematic conditions that became public health, covered with sores and ulcers and spreading up to TB. The author of this book found that the migration of a few families to Newtok in the previous 5 years is proof that the Inuit wanted to move. The diseases, overcrowding, TB, poverty still exist today. Dr. Padden and Charles Curtis, superintendent for IGA, visited Nain, and Curtis said he was appalled by what he called the most deplorable and appalling living conditions of Inuit in Nain. Definite line of demarcation between where the white settlers, police, missionaries, and storekeepers live, and the appalling slum area where the Eskimo live. The Eskimos' house covered with tarred paper, but more often not. Dr. Padden asked to go farther up to Newtok and Hebron, and he said conditions were worse than here, and Curtis said, but I did not wish to see anything worse than what I saw at Nain. The closure of Newtok, this actual picture of Hebron here in the graveyard in behind. In 1956, no Inuit were asked to attend the Labrador Conference on February 13th to the 16th, 1956, which included government leaders and health and other experts to seek solutions and social problems facing the North. Moravian missionaries went for the Inuit, and the Catholics represented the Innu. Indigenous voices were never heard at the table. It was decided Rockwood and Padden moved them to Makkovik, Nain, and Northwest River. Newtok was a learning curve for any future relocations. Now we'll move along to Hebron relocation in 1959. Hebron Inuit was relocated in 1959 with some knowledge of what happened to Newtok. Hebron Inuit made their feelings known to the administration of the Newfoundland government in 1956 in a letter destined for public welfare. They asked if Hebron was going to be moved, and they didn't want to move from their land, hunting and customs due to their livelihood. In the same letter, they were open to moving if wages and good housing were there. We would agree to the move. This was written by Men's Hebron's Meeting Levi Nukusak, William Milley, and Hebron elders. On another website, it was found that the minister did alter the letter for willingness to move. The response from the government was meaningful and nice, and there is no overt action is being contemplated to move. Back to Rockwood's advice. His defense to move was excluded from the centers of power and influence. Rockwood would go on to say, to close Hebron soon would be taking a leap in the dark, and I think the letter from the Hebron means the same thing. When the time is ripe, the Hebron people and many of the Nain folk will move on their own accord. Rockwood agreed that those relocated from Newtok should be carefully observed to see how they are assimilated at Nain and other communities, and to access the real employment. Reverend Frederick William Peacock, his advice on the relocation of Hebron. Peacock was the superintendent for the Moravian mission to Labrador. He voiced his concerns and wrote directly to Premier Joey Smallwood and turned to Smallwood's Outport Resettlement Program to appeal for Hebron's closure, even though the program did not expressly include Labrador. There was a form called Form Requesting Settlement, which only administrators or elites had access to, and on this form there were three things. names of settlements you think should be vacated, number of families involved, and the reasons why you think the settlement should be vacated. We'll look at two views here now, Peacock and Padden's points, I guess, of why they saw the move. Padden's view, unfit for human habitation, existence of pauperizing of the people of Hebron, wasting money and resources. Peacock's view, Hebron is nearly 30 miles from the wood for heating, and it gets harder to go further and taking a long time. And just giving you an idea, Hopedale to where we're to now, we're 20 miles from the tree line, so it didn't get much better. The health in this remote settlement is poor. Moravian records show infant mortality rate is high, the highest on the coast. TB is highest than in other Inuit locations. The cost to both Moravian government is high. The trout fishery can be easily produced in Nain. Better education, improve health, and create better social conditions. To save money and manpower. Gradually move out of this depressed era to better economic conditions prevailing. These suggestions from both parties put pressure on the government and put them in a difficult situation. As we just read the differences between all agencies, church, health authorities, state, different claims and traditions of rhetoric, religious, political, medical, and judicial competed with one another as church and state agents tried to distance themselves from the coming relocation and disavow responsibility for it. The officials carefully constructed announcements to convince the Inuit of the good sense of vacating Hebron. The Moravian missionaries at Hebron attempted to disclose the mission's imminent departure several times over the coming year, but each time found the Inuit response underwhelming. It was said that the Inuit had outgrown the religious form in the 19th and 20th centuries. It is almost certain that the Inuit did not react to the first or second announcement because they were more concerned about the trade store, a vital component of their economic, environmental, and social relationships. And they had been assured by the Hebron elders who had been assured by the government that they would receive fair warning until jobs and houses were built. Announcement of the closure of Hebron. The announcement of Hebron took place April 10, 1959, with no account in the Inuit oral history of any important announcement regarding the move. That morning, 2 planes landed, single engine, with Peacock, named Minister Grubb, Dr. Padden, and RCMP member Walter Shoup. Then they met with Reverend Hatesh and talked about the depot closure. Peacock confirmed that Hatesh announced at the Love Feast, which was March 29th, that they would be moving. Someone say something?
No.
Just a cough.
Reverend Peacock confirmed the mission's decision as announced earlier by Reverend Hatesh, following which I read the telegram received from you on March 25 as follows. You may inform Hebron people that following the withdrawal of the Moravian mission, government of Newfoundland and Labrador will assist families to move communities south of Nain and that the supply depot will be closed. The next day, Peacock left and the others stayed until April 15th. Here's a picture of Paul Hatesh. Hatesh describes the announcement. After a brief discussion of the situation, a message from the government was read, affecting the closure of Hebron by the government. After this, the bells were rung and all the people gathered in church. Where first we sang a hymn, then Brother Peacock spoke a few words, followed by the message from the government read by the government agent, which was then translated to the people. And we closed with a prayer and a hymn. This relieved a tension which had existed for a long time. Not a tension of joy for the move so much, but it was relieved the tension of uncertainty. It was found Inuit could not speak up about the relocation because of the power and social mores and governed body inside the church. The earliest interviews took place in 73 and 74. Other interviews took place on TV documentaries by Uhalahutagit Society, who is still active today in Nain on the radio. In the interviews in the 1970s, they found that the cultic nature of the church site and expectation of silence before God and minister that made it impossible for Inuit to speak against relocation. Inuit have cited both religious observance and observance of the Moravian civil order as reasons for the silence that enveloped them. It was said by an interviewer, "We wanted to speak out, but we couldn't because we were in the church. Only the minister could speak in the church. That's why we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't say anything in the church because that's where we sang and had meetings. Even if we wanted to speak, we weren't supposed to. That's why we couldn't do anything about relocating." There was a new community hall built in 1958 prior to the relocation announcement, and it wasn't used for the meeting. Walter Shoupp's presence, he was there as security. He described the meetings as a one-way conversation, and it was all down. In the days after the meeting, he heard telltales of drunkenness, and with no police to arrest anyone, and handled it the best they could. Drinking was one of the many acts of struggle following the meeting. He had assistance from John Piercy, a local resident. August 1959, missionaries moved out. October 5th, Grenfell nurse left. October 5th, the ship Chaprassi picked up the last of the Hebron Inuit. And my grandmother was one of those, and Darlene's as well, who was on the last few trips that summer. Homes weren't built and ready as well as jobs when they moved to Hopedale and Nain. They were overcrowded. This created the same problems they had in Hebron: TB diseases, no water and sewer, segregation from the rest of the community. There's a picture of Hopedale here on the left, a modern picture. Didn't know the hunting areas and fishing places were already owned and used. Hopedale had Inuit and settlers who moved into Hopedale in the 1950s to work on the American base. Settlers were seen as the village elite, monopolizing secular institutions such as the community council and local committees, and dominating the renewable resource and wage sectors of the village economy. And in the 1970s and 80s, Newtok and Hebron relocatees were asked to move again. First one was Udlatuk. It comes from the Inuit word meaning Udlatuk, meaning where there are Inu. My friend's family's from there. He's told me a story there. They used to go up on the hill and trade with the Inu when a couple centuries ago. The first encounter to move Hopedale was with an outsider who was married to a local woman, wanting to move the community while most settlers voted against resettlement, and some older, over 50 Hopedale Inuit. The reason for those who didn't want to move were due to depriving them of symbolic or effective ties to the hunting and fishing lifestyle. The author writes the Hebron Inuit, regardless of age, voiced nearly unanimous opposition to resettlement. Many subscribed to the sentiment that relocation would occur at the price of hunting and fishing, a price Northerners had borne once already. Both Hebron and Newtok people have resolved that any future resettlements undertaken in Northern Labrador should be on their own resettlement back north. Excuse me. Suggestions to move back to the vicinity of Newtok. The Royal Commission on Labrador recommended in 1974 that the community be re-established in the vicinity of Newtok. This proposal was intended to relieve pressure in the Northerners' host villages, aid the redevelopment of northern renewable resources, mainly char, and correct the injustices of the original evictions. I did ask around to our grandparents' generation, and they've never heard of this one going back to Newtok. It's interesting. A second encounter to move Hopedale in 1983. As you can see the picture here, there's Hopedale. You go north to the top left, and in one of the bays, that was the other option called Big Bay. Resettlement Hopedale to Big Bay, which is about 60 kilometers north of Hopedale. You can see my mouse. This is where they were trying to move Hopedale in 83, in this area here. This time the community was more opportunistic with the move, 90% in favor. Both of these moves were due to cost, as Hopedale sits on a rock, and water and sewer costs were twice the average of other communities. One man, Garfield Flowers, at the time is credited for stopping the move. He was mayor for 16 years starting in 73 and is credited for almost single-handedly having defeated the move to relocate. In a television interview in 87, He admitted part of his opposition to the relocation came from the government's reluctance to commit public funds to the relocation of private businesses, and at the time, almost all private businesses in Hopedale were his. We can see how the Inuit continue to be dominated by settlers and colonial governments, and we wonder why we see trauma being passed on, loss after loss after loss. Interactions when they moved to Nain, Hopedale, Makkovik. This is a picture of Makkovik. When the Inuit moved to Makkovik, it was found Makkovik was the greatest problem. As the author writes, though it had a few Newtok residents, Makkovik was a settler community in genius and organization, operating according to European-style perpetuary regimes. Makkovik was one of the communities that Inuit moved to after Newtok and Hebron closed. This is Mark Dawson, an anthropologist's interaction when he went to Makkovik in 2009 with the town council. There's a picture of him on the bottom left. He's still teaching. I think it's somewhere in Ontario. After the Nunavut government was formed in 2005, a researcher by the name of Mark Dawson, anthropologist, went to Makkovik, Labrador in 2009 to learn about Inuit culture, as he researched on the web that Makkovik was very involved with their Inuit culture. In Dawson's visit, and only visit in 2009, he went for 3 days and met with town mayor, councillors, and community. Makkovik has a population of about 365 as of 2021, with mostly Western people, settlers, living there from the 19th century. The community had his first settler move there by the name of Torsten Andersen from Norway, along with his wife Marianne Thomas, who was from England. On Mark's visit, he noticed an ambivalence of what he read on the web. Before colonization, Makkovik was used for thousands of years for hunting and fishing with pre-Dorset Paleo-Inuit. For the size of the population of Makkovik, most again are settlers that are from England, Welsh, Scotland, and Norway, with only those who moved there in the 19th century. Only a handful of full-blooded Inuit people are there, as they were often referred to during his visit. Some of Dawson's observations with people did not identify with Inuit culture and Labrador Inuit ancestry. Some even seemed outright opposed to it. In his meeting with councillors in the community, he said the ghosts of colonialism are still present. Nunavut government, a colonial structure. During his stay, he stayed with community councillors. He had soon realized that the identity and culture were complex in Makkovik, which one said, "Really don't care for throat singing or any of those traditions. I think that kind of singing is disgusting." Startled, he asked her, and she replied that those traditions were theirs and not hers, and that she had absolutely no interest in them. And she said there are only around 4 blood Inuit left in her community, but she rarely interacted with them, with the exception of the one who played the church organ on Sundays. That's Darlene's uncle. And he asked her who she identified with, and she bluntly said she was a settler, meaning that she identifies more with her Northern European ethnicity than with her partially Inuit ancestry. Dawson goes on to say that he realized the apparent disconnect between what I had read about the community and my subjective experience of it. I can't see my question here. Does research align with today? Identity lost for the past 20 years. I didn't know who to be. I was lost, uncomfortable around my community members and elsewhere, wondering what would be said about me, wondering who to be, very conscious of myself and believing what people said about me. While not knowing or aware of it within myself, as Gayatri Spivak claims, consciousness is derived from discourse, meaning it is constructed, not chosen. In other words, he writes, we come to know who we are by what others say about us. The consciousness of a subaltern is constructed by sources outside of self. The colonial subject is not free to be sovereign over his or her own construction of selfhood. According to Spivak, the colonial subject is defined by the voice of the colonizer. The colonial imperial process then constricts the freedom of colonized populations, not only in physical and material ways, but also in highly personal subjective ways. In essence, colonialism imperialism removes the right of colonized individuals and societies to define themselves. Comments made and said towards anyone can transform who you are if you are not aware of yourself, as was in my case. But I am mindful that this is not the case for everyone. Guidance. It was from the reading the Bible in the Moravian daily texts and researching how Inuit lived and accepted people as people and not as a statistic or for economic reasons, and how others in the same boat as me felt through different cultures around the world, gave me hope and strength to be who I am and acceptance of who I am. The forced relocation has played a role in my experiences in life, which have been passed on from colonization and loss of identity, residential schools, etc. It took 5 years to get where I am today, through my spiritual journey and my studies to see a reflection of myself and help from my professors, and they know who they are. Working on each step like this research paper here on relocation and the effects of colonization has relieved so many unknowns and thoughts about things that happened. I was carrying on the burdens without knowing whom all played a role in the relocation. The intergenerational trauma was passed on to my oldest son with no fault of his own. I am hopeful my two younger children will break the cycles of the traumas that have been given to me as I become more aware of myself by what I say and my actions. While aware that my approach with my oldest son has grown and redirected into breaking the cycles as well from colonial interactions. I name what I passed on to him, and he wasn't the problem and never was. My teaching and approach were all that I knew at that time. It was normal to be that way, as everything before this journey with God was accepted in our community. Please don't think I got it all right. I know I'm not perfect. It's not a work in progress, and it is a work in progress and a daily adjustment of what I carry and let go of, to become present each day with God, myself, and neighbors. Nain and Hopedale have higher Inuit populations on the coast of Labrador and are seen as others and left behind in all economic and political opportunities. The Nunavut government and other governments are playing a role in it as well, such as hiring in jobs, who gets appointed or hired, contracts with companies inside and outside of our region, involvement of committees, etc. We see Inuit without jobs, living in poverty, higher rates of suicide, food insecurity, inadequate housing, poor health conditions, addictions to alcohol and drugs, which goes to show by moving Newtok and Hebron, the conditions only worsened. The relocations didn't make any difference as to what was seen by doctors as what they saw in Nain in the 40s and 50s, or the Moravian missionaries' influence and the government officials. Some 80 years later, we are still in the same boat, even with governance, which begs the question, is the Nunavut government doing the same thing as what previous non-Indigenous governments did? Self-governance. The Nunavut government was signed in 2005 with the provincial and federal government. Since the signing, we are called beneficiaries, which includes non-Indigenous peoples who are getting the same benefits as Inuit and who get the higher paying jobs, contracts, appointments, and opportunities through all aspects of the land claims, and partnerships with the non-Indigenous businesses economically, educationally, health benefits, again, at the expense of the Inuit. Inuit are in the same process as was in the 50s. The colonial logic is active in the Nunavut government with no talk about it. So the research conducted is accurate to the 21st century. We see Inuit again living in poor housing, poor health, food insecurity, lack of field to heat homes, as I mentioned, is 20 miles from Hopedale to the nearest wood tree line. Settlers are still at a higher advantage with jobs and businesses opportunities at the top of the chain, while we see Inuit dying and being taken advantage of for the betterment of beneficiaries within the land claims. With research on colonization and identity fraud, which is becoming a big topic now in Canada, even at the federal level, they have some subcommittees developed and are talking about it. It is a matter of time before the Nunavut government has to look at itself. The powers to be, including the Nunavut government, repeat and eliminate the Inuit from becoming their own. The living conditions haven't improved to the extent that it was supposed to. We lack the Inuit leadership, accountability, validation, and acceptance of being Inuit. We don't have the people and resources for mental health staff, counselors, doctors, etc. When outside help comes, they may last a year and move on, and the cycle starts again, and our people give up, as they know that they will move on again. Becoming king. Last slide. 2025, I do find less talk about the differences and struggles between Inuit and settlers since the acclimation in the 1950s, more of an acceptance of each other. I am seeing a difference, especially this past year within our community, and a space where members of our community are finding it easier to talk about God within their own space and much more enthusiasm for wanting the Moravian daily text. It's a slow process, but one that can change the cycle and help each person to grow into who they are and where they fit in this world as Inuit. I believe in time our community members will find their way to God's love that will grow and move our community into one that builds on Inuit values that are already theirs. We just have to recognize it, listen to it, and to build on to let go of what was passed on to us and what we carried on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac.
Trying to stop sharing here. Stop
And Mac, I
sharing.
just want to say, I want to thank you for being so open and vulnerable and like share of your own personal journey. It just makes the information that you shared with us that much more powerful and meaningful to us. So thank you so much for that. Same rules. If you have a question here in the room, raise your hand. If you have a question online. No, you can go first. If you have a question online, you can use the hand raising function or just wave at us and we'll get to you. So who wants to go first? Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mac. Could you just talk a little bit more? So I really liked at the end how you said there is more willingness and openness to talk about God. Could you talk about the dynamic between, because I know this came up in the class when we were, in the thesis writing class, the dynamic that is taking place between traditional Inuit understandings of God and Christian understanding of God, and how you are working to bridge that dialogue.
If I understand your question correctly, the Moravian daily text is a big part of it, and just giving it them, let them have it in their own space and learn God on their own is really impactful, I think. And this year, like Darlene noticed that as we were delivering them house to house, there was more enthusiasm. We sent people on the road, for example, who said, "Oh, I can't wait to get mine. Thank you for giving us the daily text." It's that in their own space, right? We just give them the opportunity. And traditionally in the church and through services too, we're trying to incorporate more of an indigenous approach slowly. That's more relatable to our people, to understand God's word more, to take it in. For example, we done it there last year. I think it was during Easter, the Holy Week readings, and the traditional structure is the minister's up on the pulpit and he's just reading the whole readings for that day, and everybody else is silent. So Darlene said, "We'll do this. We'll sit in a circle and we'll take turns each reading the verses for that day of the Holy Week readings." And as we done it, and when we were done, one of the participants said, "I learned more this way." They were involved in reading and learning, so I think those aspects are key to bringing our Inuit values and traditions up in a circle too. And like we want to bring in our hulik and use that as a light in the future, and bring in sealskin and deer skins and harpoons, and just to make it more relatable, because I just can imagine when the missionaries first came to Hopedale, how would they know what a donkey was? It would make more sense to put Jesus on a kamutek, on a sled, and a dog team going into Jerusalem or into Hopedale to relatable to our people, so we can understand and get the concept more in a way that works for us, I guess. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure if that was what you were looking for.
Yeah, yes, it does, thank you.
John?
In your presentation, you talked about the meeting in 1958, where it was held in the church and the people were silenced, but it had been held in the community center. Do you think the people would have talked up, would have commented, would have maybe tried to prevent the move? I don't know whether you can look back at history that way or not, but if it was in a place where they weren't told to sit down and shut up. We're all brought up that way. You go into church, sit down, you listen to the clergy.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. So that men's meeting hall was built in 58 specifically for meetings. And it's easy for us to judge, like you said, to go back at history and look at it now. But and just from the interviewers who done interviews with people, what happened, it gives us an idea that they weren't allowed to say anything in church. So they knew another building had to be built for them to be able to speak up about concerns or issues. So from my observation, interpretation of what I read through the research, yes, it would have been an opportunity for them to speak up. That's why it was built. So, yeah.
That's would have, could have, should have.
Yeah. Elaine, go ahead.
Wow, Mac, you cut off a lot there for us to try to chew over with you. One of my first thoughts is, when this gets out in the community, are you going to get any backlash for your analysis, as correct as it is, on the Nazi government being colonial? And what are you going to do with that? But I'm not asking you that. Just a comment.
You two can have a conversation with that later.
Yeah, I mean, it's very brave, and kudos to you for taking that risk. One of many that you have taken within your thesis. But my question to you is, so now that you're using a different approach in church and you're sitting in a circle, are people more able to talk in church and discuss things in church? Is that part of how you're changing the way that you're involving people in the Bible and God and church structure?
Yeah, great comment. To answer your first part, I guess it's not my words. Most of the thesis is research, so I'm just putting it together and giving you what happened. But you can see that last tell about it is my observation of what's happening now. So obviously, yes, that's my observation of it. And to answer your other question is that it's a slow process to get what me and Darlene is trying to do to bring in our culture. It's very slow, so we have to take our time and be very delicate in how we do it. So, but we do know it works. We just got to keep moving forward with it and putting ideas there and open people's minds slowly to be acceptance of our own culture and our identity to be in church. But we are hopeful that at one might be an art of lifetime. We do recognize that, myself and Darlene. But we know it's in the back of our mind and it do work, and our people, I am hopeful that one day that we can worship God through our culture.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, Mac, you're moving at the speed of friendship.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody online have a question?
Just the comment.
Right.
With my thing about the land and how much and is so much a part of Indigenous culture. And I often hear, like with Mckinley's thesis about relocation, I often hear people say, oh, my parents or my grandparents were relocated too. We don't have the trauma you guys have. We don't have the addictions. I'll get over it type of thing. And I think what it needs to understand is that, like in my presentation, the land is so a part of the Indigenous culture. It's a part of them, of who they are and how much they rely on the land. I think that's one thing, like I said, the different point of views, my value and your values is different. And if they're different, what I express, you won't understand, and what you express, I won't understand. But just being able to listen to understand our position on land and how important it is. And especially for a man who's the head of the household, who prides himself on providing for his family, being moved to a place where he has to learn everything, knowing that he can't provide, kind of trickles down in terms of the intergenerational trauma. He begins to second guess his ability. Then what do you turn to? And then it just trickles down into intergenerational trauma. And I think that's just understanding that dynamic in terms of, like I said, the way Indigenous people feel about the land is the biggest issue, I think. Just to share that. Thank you.
If I could add, I really thank you for talking about your own personal experience and just that you talked briefly on the intergenerational trauma that most people really don't get. And I think that's the problem. It becomes a flashpoint for people. They keep, in their minds, don't understand why and to get beyond it, I think we just need to hear more of those stories so that people really get the depth of how it plays out and how it gets transmuted.
Yes,
I
hopefully in
think-
time. Sorry, go ahead,
And I
Dr.
think it's
Joanne.
very important within a generational trauma to do our work. If we don't understand it, then read the psychiatrist, like the scientific. It's not just a story, like it physically changes your DNA, and it's studied, it's measurable, and I think we have to, when we hear those terms, we have to do the work to figure out what that is. I do appreciate, and I think you may have let the church get off a little bit too easy, but that's okay. We're gonna make a radical theologian out of you.
Pretty close.
Yes. I have a funny feeling like they might be like the government might be going, I don't think we should send any more students to Queen's College.
Radicalized.
It's a new government too, so it's a long ways from being where we need to be, but it will get there.
Yeah. The ineffable Tom Mugford, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, McKinley, for sharing this afternoon. Takes courage and a lot of bravery, so appreciate the vulnerability. Also curious, we talk about incorporating or bringing Inuit spirituality into as an institution, the Moravian Church. Is your vision that you would, or the communities, we would as Inuit, celebrate our Inuit spirituality versus a defined denomination in a Christian context, or do you see that as a totally separate entity?
Good question. I think it will be working together, both. The Hebrew Bible, as Rob said, it's colonized too. But we go back to the whole Hebrew Bible, their connection with land and how they use land and the spirituality from the land is no different from my examples and understanding and research on Inuit spirituality is very, very similar. It's just ours weren't written down the Inuit way. Hebrew was written down, and you can see the similarities of how we look at the land and the animals we live with and see every day.
Yeah, I've often said that that colonizers have used what we to write down what we've lived our whole for millennia. So I agree. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good question. Thank you.
Go ahead,
Carmel?
McKinley, I just want to thank you, first of all, for bringing us the story, your story, and the story of the Inuit. And I think I only had little bits and pieces of that story. So the very telling of it, I don't know if you understand the power that those stories taken that way and put together have in and of themselves. There's a power there that I think that if the story were shared in that way with others, instead of having people polarized into, camps this way and that way, that the story itself does something for you. It creates another space that people can, for the first time, see how much this cost people. And I think if we're able to be in that cost, to not to have to dismiss it, but to stay there for a bit, it will call forth transformation of the people who hear the story. So I'm encouraging you to continue to find ways to spread that story. And I really thank you for it. So thank you.
Thank you for the
Darlene,
comment.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. It's taken in, and definitely we do. Darlene keeps saying we need to get this out to our community members who's wanting to know, because all my life, all I knew was that one-sided view.
Yeah.
They were put into church and they weren't allowed to say nothing. That's all I ever knew about it. And my grandmother's from there. And that's all I knew. She never ever talked about what happened. She never told us. Same with Darlene's grandparents. Both of hers was from there. They didn't explain what exactly happened. So this opened my mind more, but created more questions as well. So
Yeah.
but it's helpful. It helped me a lot into my journey now to move forward and to let that rest now, not rest, but acknowledge what happened there and to start to make peace with that, to move forward.
You have to name reality before people can do anything. Otherwise, it's like you're walking around the dark feeling, there's something not right, but you don't know what it is. So again, I encourage you strongly to spread that story any place you can.
Thank you.
Without truth, there will be no reconciliation. Mac is speaking the truth.
And
Michelle.
Well, this might be a wildly naive comment, but I almost suddenly envision Mac as having some role in the Inuit government. What do you think?
Revolution!
Michelle, I'm praying, like I know our studies is coming up, and I'm praying to where to be, and maybe you're answering one of those prayers. Hard to remember. It's up next year, Tom, so we'll see.
Matt, can I ask you one last question?
Sure.
You shared in your journey that it was really through encountering the Bible anew and through the Moravian daily text that really started you on this journey, right?
Yep.
And coming to Queen's College and through more academic study, you started to really explore and open up to your Inuit identity. So now do you feel like you're almost coming full circle, whereas you discover more about your Inuit identity, that now plays back into your reading of scripture, how you understand it, how it impacts your life, and how you live out your faith as a Moravian Christian?
So what's your question? What's your question again?
That was very long-winded. So do you feel like this kind of awakening of your Indigenous identity is now influencing the way that you read scripture, basically is what I'm saying, asking.
It's a different outlook for sure now with my Inuit identity in it. I'm more connecting to the land and how much language is used for animals and land in it. I'm more observant in reading the Bible that way and seeing the connection.
And myself and Mckinley, we often discuss this. I think reading the Bible in a place where you feel comfortable in who you are you are more open to what's being said. Because if you're holding on grudges or holding on the past, like that's the reason why I think McKinley did this, is like there's a lot of baggage there in terms of the Hebron, because we're all connected to that story, that history, and just coming from a place of being, your heart is open to know the truth now.
Oh, for sure. It made it more clear and, like Darlene said, more open and more accepting and
Not
listening more to.
not shutting it off,
Yeah.
saying I don't want to feel this.
Yeah.
With God, He allows you to feel it.
Go through each emotion and understanding of what happened, I guess.
Good,
I don't know if it's a full circle though, Rob. I'm not. Nothing's coming up to say there's a full circle yet. It's just becoming aware now, like the last 2 years of our own identity. It's just only work in progress. I think I can't say full circle, but I'm becoming more confident in myself, and it's
Yeah,
okay.
Dr. Joanne said it's not a circle, it's a spiral.
That's the Jewish understanding.
I thought you were going around.
Tom's comment, we can be both proud of our Inuit identity and our connection with Christianity and personal relationship with God. Yeah, yeah, that's what I was trying to, like, it's not an either or. I know for you now, Mac, it's not an either or. I just, one flowing into the other.
I wouldn't be here without God. Like on this view now, that He opened my heart and my mind and gave me another insight. And I tell you, it lifted a lot of burdens and weight off my shoulders, and it's still happening yet. It's just better with Jesus.
Well, it's like Darlene said in her presentation about being able to be who you were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right, so you're experiencing that yourself.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mac.
Thank you for your questions. I love them.